Some stories don't make it into the history books, but they made it into the land. Relics of the Past is a narrative, historical, storytelling podcast hosted by myself, Cheryl Johnson, exploring the forgotten people, contested places, and buried truths. It is not a ghost story. It is something far more unsettling: the truth. By the time the Revolutionary War began, America was not a unified nation. It was a patchwork. People from different countries, religions, and social classes were living under a mix of colonial governments. They shared a continent, but not much else. When the break with Britain came, it was not unanimous. Millions of people genuinely believed revolution was a catastrophic mistake. What's remarkable isn't that the revolution happened. It's what came after. People who disagreed about the most fundamental question a society can face, whether to tear itself free from its government, sat down together and worked. They argued furiously. They made deeply flawed compromises. But they built a structure designed to hold together people who disagreed. They didn't resolve their differences. They built a system where they could fight over those differences without tearing the country down. In the end, they found something they needed more than they needed to be right. They found each other. On the morning of July 11, 1804, two of the most powerful men in America stood on a cliff in New Jersey and pointed pistols at each other. Aaron Burr was the sitting vice president. Alexander Hamilton was the former Treasury Secretary and the brains behind the banking system. They had been political rivals for 2 decades. It all boiled over when Hamilton reportedly insulted Burr's character during an election. Back then, gentlemanly honor was everything. You could not let an insult stand. They stood 10 paces apart and fired. Hamilton was mortally wounded and died the next day. Burr walked away untouched, but his life was over. Hit with murder charges and deeply disgraced, the sitting vice president never recovered. It's a lesson the founders paid for in blood. Pride destroys the people who carry it. Aaron Burr didn't win that day. He simply survived, and that is not the same thing. From its beginning, America had a restlessness built into its character, a conviction that the next mountain range held something worth fighting for. That instinct shaped the country, but it cost enormously. It started in 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase. Napoleon needed cash, so Thomas Jefferson bought 828,000 square miles for $15 million, about 3 cents an acre. Overnight, the nation doubled in size. Jefferson sent Lewis and Clark to map it. They traveled 8,000 miles to the Pacific and back, proving the continent could be crossed. Then came the settlers. Starting in the 1840s, 400,000 people walked the 2,000-mile Oregon Trail. They battled cholera, starvation, and winter storms, but the wagons kept coming. By 1849, gold was found in California, drawing 300,000 fortune seekers to the coast. Most didn't strike it rich. The real money was made by the people selling shovels and denim jeans. Every step west required incredible courage, but it came with a heavy price. The grit was real, and so was the cost. The story of westward expansion cannot be told honestly without facing what it destroyed. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, forcing Native American tribes west of the Mississippi. When the Supreme Court ruled the removal unconstitutional, Jackson ignored them. What followed was the Trail of Tears. 5 nations were forcibly marched over 1,000 miles in the dead of winter without adequate food or shelter, and a quarter of the Cherokee Nation died along the way. They called it the place where people cried. Decades of Indian wars followed on the Great Plains. Tribes like the Lakota and Cheyenne fiercely resisted, even winning a massive victory at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, where Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse annihilated Custer. But it was one of the last victories, broken by the U.S. Army and the systemic slaughter of the buffalo herds. Resistance was futile. What was built in the West is real, but what was destroyed to build is equally real. They are not competing truths. They are the same history. There is something in the American character that has always loved a good outlaw story, but the reality of a classic case of historical myth-making. Take Jesse James. Dime novels turned him into a hero. He did rob trains, but the part about giving to the poor was totally made up. Or Billy the Kid. He wasn't a misunderstood hero. He was an orphan from New York who killed 8 men in a turf war. He died at just 21. But the famous gunfight at the OK Corral lasted only 30 seconds. 3 men died, not for some grand ideal, but over a turf war. The outlaws were romanticized. They were violent criminals who terrorized communities. The real victory of the Wild West wasn't the lawlessness. It was the arrival of courts, property rights, and the boring machinery of civilization that actually allowed people to build a life. In 1857, the Supreme Court made a ruling so destructive it helped push America into the Civil War. An enslaved man named Dred Scott sued for his freedom. He argued that because his owner had taken him to live in a free state and territories, he was legally a free man. But Chief Justice Robert Taney didn't just reject the case, he went to war with the concept of freedom itself. Taney ruled that the African Americans, free or enslaved, were not citizens and had no rights which the white people should respect. Then he went further, declaring that Congress had absolutely no authority to ban slavery in any U.S. territory. The reaction was immediate and volcanic. The political center collapsed. Abolitionists realized the system was entirely rigged, making war feel inevitable. The decision was finally overturned by the 14th Amendment after the Civil War. Dred Scott didn't live to see it. He died a free man just months after the ruling, freed by his owners, but his name remains forever tied to the case associated with his name. 2 years after the Supreme Court ruled that black Americans could never be citizens, a white abolitionist named John Brown decided it was time to take matters into his own hands. To Brown, slavery wasn't a political debate, it was a sin. Decades of arguments had failed, and the courts had only made it worse. He believed the only language slavery understood was force. In October 1859, Brown led a raid on the Federal Armory at Harpers Ferry, Virginia. His plan was wildly ambitious: steal the weapons, arm enslaved people, and ignite a massive revolution. He had just 21 men. The raid lasted 36 hours before federal troops led by Robert E. Lee stormed the building. Brown was captured, tried for treason, and sentenced to hang. On his way to the gallows, he handed his guard a note. I am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away, but with blood. 16 months later, the Civil War began. John Brown's raid failed, but his prophecy came true. The Civil War cost 620,000 American lives, more than every other U.S. war combined. The central issue was slavery, and when Abraham Lincoln was elected, the South seceded to protect it. 4 years of brutal warfare followed. Families were literally split down the middle, with brother fighting against brother on blood-soaked battlefields. The Union won, and the 13th Amendment officially abolished slavery. For a brief moment during Reconstruction, 4 million newly freed black Americans voted. Then the government walked away. In 1877, federal troops withdrew from the South, and the gains of Reconstruction were violently dismantled by the Jim Crow laws. It took another century for America to pick up the pieces. The war between brothers ended a long time ago. The argument over what it was for has never stopped. The Gilded Age looked like an age of prosperity, but the gold was only surface deep. Between 1870 and the early 1900s, America's economy exploded. Railroads stretched across the continent. Factories multiplied. Fortunes were built. But so was inequality. The richest became unimaginably wealthy. Millions of workers endured long hours, dangerous jobs, and poverty wages. As inequality grew, so did demands for change. Reformers fought child labor. They pushed for safer workplaces. They challenged corporate monopolies. Women demanded the right to vote. Every era faces its own version of the Gilded Age. Leaders like Jane Addams, Ida B. Wells, and Theodore Roosevelt helped build the country. Yesterday it was railroads and steel. Today's it's AI and automation. History suggests that the same challenge remains. Innovation creates opportunity. Every generation eventually asks the same question: can people this different really share one country? In the 1850s, it was whether a nation half slave and half free could survive. History keeps returning the same answer. The Union has endured not because Americans agreed, but because they chose to stay together despite profound disagreements. The divisions are real. The Civil War showed what happens when disagreement hardens into contempt and contempt into violence. The Constitution was never meant to create consensus. It was designed to manage conflict, to give a deeply different people a way to argue without tearing the country apart. That system has been tested, broken, and rebuilt. It has survived because at pivotal moments, enough Americans chose to continue the argument instead of ending the Union. Every generation must answer the same question again. So far, despite everything, the answer has remained yes. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to leave a 5-star rating to help others discover this valuable content. Your support is greatly appreciated and helps us continue creating engaging episodes for our listeners.